Did you know that paradigms control the results in your life? That's true. They have the power over everything from your relationships to your income. And when you shift your paradigm, everything in your life improves. Hello, I'm Bob Proctor, and I want to welcome you to Paradigm Shift, where we're going to show you or teach you how to make dramatic improvements in the quality of your life. I picked up an old saying a number of years ago that I truly love. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. You know, Steve Bow one time said God's gift to us is more talent and ability than we'll ever hope to use in our lifetime. And our gift to God is to develop as much of that talent and ability as we can in this lifetime. To do that, we're going to have to understand who we are. We're going to have to understand what makes us tick, why we do some of the things we do, and why we don't do many of the things that we'd really like to do. We live in a very fast-changing world. I think Bill Gates put it very well. He said, one thing is clear. We don't have the option of turning away from the future. No one gets to vote on whether technology is going to change our life. Think about that for a moment. You know, I could take you back a long ways back to around 1970. I had the very good fortune of being on a program with Eric Hoffer. Now, Eric Hoffer's long gone, but he was an incredible man. He wrote a great book called The True Believer. He said, in times of change, the learners will inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world no longer exists. Think of that. In times of change, the learners will inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. Do you know we can go all the way through our educational system and miss out on one important subject? We don't study ourselves. Oh, we get into a little bit of psychology and a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but very few people understand who they are. Do you know, inscribed over the Ark of Apollo at Delphi are two words: know thyself. We should know thy high self. You see, if we're going to take what Steve Bow said to heart, that God's gift to us was more talent and ability than we'll ever hope to use, and our gift to God is to develop as much of that as we can, we're going to have to understand how to develop it. And you know, as we get into this program on paradigm, you're going to understand more about yourself. I spend a lot of time helping people understand how the mind functions, because if we don't understand how the mind functions, you're never going to shift a paradigm. And a lot of people say, you know, Bob, you're being too repetitive. Do you know, that's how paradigms are formed, and that's exactly how they're going to change. Solomon put it very well one time many years ago. He said, in all you're getting, get understanding. Well, we want to understand how our mind functions. And it's through the repetition of the ideas that understanding starts to develop. There's only one way to develop understanding, and that's through study. There isn't any other way of doing it. Now, Joel Barker wrote a book on paradigms. I've quoted him many, many times. In fact, I repeat the same thing over and over again because it's that important. He said to ignore the power of paradigms to influence your judgment is to put yourself at risk when exploring the future. I don't want to put myself at risk when exploring the future. I want to know exactly where I'm going to go and what I'm going to do. And I want to suggest you'd want to do the same thing. You see, we can know exactly where we're going to go. We can take a pen and sit down and decree with absolute certainty of what our life's going to be like. I call that treasure mapping. You know, Solomon said, where there is no vision, the people will perish. Well, he was right. We've got to build a clear vision of what we want to do with our life. And it isn't going to be simple. Now, you and I think in pictures. And very, very few people have an image when it comes to the mind. Let me explain something to you. If I asked you to think of your automobile, you're hearing my voice. Now, my voice is actually a vibration. I activate vocal cords. I set up a vibration. Your hearing sense picks up that vibration. It sends it flying down through a nerve passageway, strikes a group of cells in your brain. Those cells increase in amplitude of vibration. They were the cells that had been impregnated with an image of your automobile. Now, let me show you how fast I can change pictures in your mind. Go to your clothes closet. Now go to your refrigerator. Now go into your garage. Now go to your bedroom. Now go into the washroom. Now go to your front door. Do you see how fast we were flipping pictures? Now go to your mind. Do you see, the problem that we have is we have no cells of recognition for the mind. And so when we think of the mind, most people think of the brain. Now, the brain is not the mind any more than your fingernail is. You see, mind is movement. Body is the manifestation of that movement. Well, your brain is part of your body. Now, the mind uses the brain. It activates brain cells. You see, the brain cannot think, but you think with the brain. Now, to explain that a little clearer, I often mention that we've got Albert Einstein's brain in a jar somewhere in New Jersey, I'm told, but it's not doing anybody any good because Albert's not with it. You see, you use your brain, just same as you use your hand, you use your feet, well, you use your brain. You activate brain cells. Now, we've got an abundance of brain cells that we want to educate. We want to impregnate with pictures and build a picture of the mind. So, as I get involved in this next series of ideas, I want you to go over this and over this and over this. I explain this many times every day, and I've been explaining it every day now for over 38 years. You say, well, don't you ever get tired of it? No, I don't. Because you see, the more often I go through it, the more I understand it myself. You know, Hubbard put it very well. He said, when you read a good book through the second time, you don't see something in it you didn't see before. You see something in yourself that wasn't there before. There's a Dr. Thurman Fleet from San Antonio, Texas. In 1934, he was very involved in the healing arts. And he said, we've got a very serious problem. We're not going to see any health until we start to treat the whole person. Now, all we're treating is symptoms. We treat the body. The body is the expression of the disease. The disease is inside. And it's just what it says. It's dis-ease. So he said, if we're going to really treat the person and eliminate the disease, we're going to have to go to the cause of the disease. And he said, we live simultaneously on three planes of understanding. We're spiritual beings. We have an intellect, and we live in a physical body. Well, if there's a problem with the person, all three parts of the person's personality has been affected. The spiritual side, the intellectual side, and the body. So he said, we're going to have to treat the whole person. Now, to do this, he said, we have to have an image to work with. And he said, I'm going to give you a picture of the mind. Now, he said, there's the mind and the body. If you're in any seminars that I do, I don't care whether here on the show or a live seminar, I am going to have that in front of you all the time. Get familiar with it. In fact, get to like it. Now, when I look at that drawing, I think of me. When I think of me, I see that drawing. I think of me as mind and body. If I were working with you, I'd be watching your body just like a hawk. I'd be super sensitive to the energy I was picking up from you. And that's going to tell me what's going on inside. See, we hide nothing. Everything that goes on the inside, we show up on the outside. Now, there's two parts to the mind. There's the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. One's called the intellectual mind, and the other's called the emotional or the universal side of the mind. So when we get studying these two parts, we want to understand how they function, because they function totally different. Now, the conscious mind is the part that we think with. It's the thinking mind. This is the part of our mind where we can accept or reject. Let's suppose you're reading a newspaper and you see where the economy is going down. Do you know that during the Great Depression of the 30s, there were people earning millions of dollars? The economy didn't go down for everyone. The economy went up for some. We are in control. We were given dominion over. Do you know what our problem is? We haven't learned how to take dominion over. We were told we were given dominion over the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air. You know, and we've done that. We can swim deeper and faster than fish. We can fly higher and faster than birds. You know what we haven't learned to do? We haven't learned to walk across the face of the earth like brothers and sisters. We haven't learned to take control over our own life. Now think about this for a moment. If you're going to accept everything that comes your way, you're going to have a very confused, dismal, problem-striven life. You really will. What we want to do, we want to look and we want to think. And we want to understand, regardless of what we hear or see, we've got the ability to accept or reject it. Now, you see, if we do this and we do it properly, we'll ask, will this keep me on purpose? Will it keep me going in the direction I want to go? Am I going to be using my creative faculties? Am I going to become all God meant to become if I do what I'm reading or what I'm seeing? If the answer is no, you reject it. Now, the fact that everyone's doing it That doesn't mean you should do it. See, if you're going to do what everyone's doing, you're probably not going to have any more than everyone has. And if you take a look at it, if there's a large group of people going that way and one or two going that way, and you're not going to think for yourself you're going to follow other people, follow the one or two. And you'll probably never make another mistake as long as you live. Historically, the masses have all marched off in the same direction together, going nowhere. It's often been said that, we come into this world with nothing and we leave with nothing. Most people arrive, no hair, no teeth, no money. They leave exactly the same way. It doesn't have to be that way. We can develop ourselves into something phenomenal. Now, although everything we have at the time of our death belongs to someone else, what we are is ours forever. This is an eternal journey that you and I are on. And what we want to do is really develop ourselves. And we have the conscious ability to make a choice to do that. You see, that's the beautiful thing to learn about the conscious mind. It has the ability to accept or reject. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess I shouldn't say unfortunately, the subconscious mind cannot do that. The subconscious mind will accept anything you give to it. And it has no ability to reject. It accepts everything that comes their way. Now think about it for a moment. Your subconscious mind will accept everything. It has no ability to reject. Now here's another beautiful thing to understand about the subconscious mind. It cannot differentiate between what's real and what's imagined. Now think about that for a moment. Anybody in the medical profession will be quick to tell you that placebos are commonly used, although most of them don't really know where the word came from. The word placebo comes from the Latin verb to please. And they'll give a person a sugar pill or a nothing pill. And they will tell them that it's going to eliminate all discomfort or all pain. Or this is going to put you right to sleep. And you know something like that, the person goes to sleep. They'll maybe come along with a syringe. And they'll push a little bit out and they fix the arm and then they stick it in and in it goes, and boom, the person's gone for 12 hours. Why? Because the nurse told them that they were going to go out for 12 hours, that this was very powerful and it was going to put them to sleep. Do you know what was in it? Nothing but distilled water. How does that happen? Well, it's the idea. The person doesn't accept or reject. The person's conscious mind is set aside. They're not thinking at all. Their subconscious mind is wide open, and the medical professional puts an idea in the subconscious mind. That idea must be expressed with and through the body. Say, well, that's absurd. That couldn't happen. It's happening all the time. Do you know most people are in a deep hypnotic trance? Hypnosis is nothing but suggestion. That's all it is. It's an idea that's given to the subconscious mind, and of course, whatever is impressed must be expressed. Your subconscious mind has no ability to reject. It'll accept anything you give to it. Now, I have talked about this an awful lot, and yet most people don't seem to get it. I want you to go back to the time, mentally, take yourself back to the time when you were born. When you arrived on the scene, do you know that you had no conscious faculties? Your subconscious mind was wide open. It was wide open to impression. And you know something? People kept saying the same things. They kept doing the same things. They kept eating the same food. And you know where all that information was going? It was going right into your subconscious mind. Now, through the repetition of an idea being planted in the subconscious mind, it becomes fixed. A fixed idea is more commonly referred to as a habit pattern. Stop and think of what time you get up. You generally get up at the same time every day. You know why? It's a habit. It's a habit. If you sleep in, you generally sleep in every day. It's a habit. I want you to stop and mentally go through the routine that you go through when you get out of bed. It's a habit. There's no thought given to it. You automatically move into action. Do you know, when a lady's putting on her makeup or a man is shaving, there's no thought given to that. It's done automatically. I want you to stop and think of yourself driving your car. You're driving along, you may be holding the phone, trying to talk on the phone. You're driving through heavy city traffic. You're carrying on the conversation maybe with the person beside you. You're listening to the radio all the time. You're driving a car through heavy city traffic. You may be driving with your knee pressed against the steering wheel. Go back to when you first started to drive a car. How are you doing it? You had a grip on that wheel. You're trying to remember the clutch, the brake. Nothing seemed to work right. The person that was teaching you was screaming. You were screaming. You were hitting the brake. The car's jumping. But after a while, through the repetition of the ideas being programmed into your mind, they became fixed in your subconscious mind. Now, when you take a multitude of ideas and fix them in the subconscious mind, that's what we constitute a paradigm. So you see, your paradigm is your subconscious conditioning. It's in every cell of your being. Now, you know, some students are programmed, their paradigm keeps their grades at around a C level, failing. Yet they have the intelligence to ace every exam they sit down at. Why do they fail? People have the ability to earn millions of dollars, and they're scraping by, just barely earning enough to get by on. Why is that? It's paradigms. It's the way we're programmed. You see, this should be taught in school. We should start teaching it to a baby at birth. That's when a baby learns the fastest. But we don't do that. We sort of coast along through life, never paying much attention to what's happening. Now, do you know, your thinking is controlled by your paradigm. It really is controlled by your paradigm. The paradigm influences your thinking. It isn't necessarily controlled, but it certainly influences it. Stop and think of everything you're doing and understand this. There's a better way of doing it. I remember years ago, I went to work for the Prudential Insurance Company of America. I was working with them in their Mid-America region in Chicago. This was the #1 region on the whole company. They were the #1 insurance company in the entire world. They had 20,000 district agents, and in the 100-year history of their company, they had never had one person write $5 million a year. Now, when I started to work with them, I stood up in front of about 450 other people, and I said, you know, anyone in the room can go out this year and write $5 million in business. Now, the second I mentioned that like that, I lost the audience. Their body stayed in the room, but mentally they took off. They weren't about to listen to me. And at the break, one fella come up to me. His name was Don Slovan. And Don said to me, he said, Proctor, have you ever sold insurance? And I said, no, I never have. He said, I didn't think so. And I said, why are you saying that? He says, you don't know what you're talking about. I said, oh, I do know what I'm talking about. I just said I've never sold insurance. He said, do you know that we have 20,000 agents in this company? I said, yeah, I've heard that. He said, do you know that the company is 100 years old next year? And I said, yeah, I've heard that too. He said, do you know that we have never had one agent write $5 million? I said, then you could be the first. And he looked at me and I said, if you go back in there and open your mind and listen to what I'm saying. Now, I said, there's a big difference between listening and hearing. I said, you're programmed to hear. As long as you're in the room, you're going to hear my voice. You hear with your ears. That's a sensory factor. But you listen with your emotions. And if you go back in there and listen very closely, you'll override your old conditioning. And you know that I could show you just do two things different, and you'll change your life. He said, okay, I'll do that. I said, you're programmed to operate the way you operate. I said, you follow a routine. When you get out of bed in the morning, you go through a routine. And I'm not going to ask you to change the routine. I'm only going to ask you to change two things, just two. Now, I said, I want you to be in front of someone by 9 a.m. Be in front of a real live prospect by 9 a.m. I'm not talking about being on the phone. I'm talking skin to skin. Be right in front of the person at 9 a.m. And I want you to put your hand out and shake hands with that person at 9 a.m. Then I want you to ask that person to buy $100,000 worth of insurance. You don't have to sell them. You don't even have to sell them. Just ask them to buy. That's it. He said, that's all I have to do. I said, yeah. He said, well, that would be a breeze. And I said, no, it wouldn't. Because I said, you're not programmed to do that. Now, think about it for a few minutes. I don't know where you are at 9 o'clock, Don, but it's highly unlikely that you're in front of a real live prospect. And I want you to go back and think of the average size insurance policy that you sell. Now, this was a number of years ago, and $100,000 was a respectable amount of business. He said, listen, I'm going to do that. If I can write the $5 million, I'll write it. Now, that was around August. He said, you said we could do it this year. The year's over half gone. I said, then it isn't going to take you as long to do it. Do you know the second week in December, he had $5,200,000 worth of business on the books, and he closed the year with a little better than $6 million. And there was a whole string of people following him. Do you know that the Prudential sales went up by hundreds of millions of dollars in that area? There was around 3,000 salespeople, and I got them all working on the idea of being in front of somebody at 9 a.m. Now, it sort of became the thing to do. What did they do prior to that? They used to go to their office at 9 a.m. They weren't selling any insurance, sir, but they went there. They were shuffling lead cards. I don't know what they were doing. They thought they were working. Do you know something? If you're on commission and you're not in front of a prospect, you're unemployed. It's that simple. And think of this. The paradigm's controlling the behavior. Don Slovin's sales went through the roof. The company's sales went through the roof. Now you'd say, well, why weren't they doing that before? Beats me. Didn't understand the paradigms, I guess. It wasn't part of the training program. They were sending out psychologists to shadow what I was doing, trying to figure out what I was doing. You see, my own income went from $4,000 to over $1 million, and I wasn't satisfied with that. I wanted to know why it did. And I knew there was more to it than me reading a book and listening to a recording. And so I used to buy the books and the recordings, give them to everybody. Nothing happened. And I thought somebody has to know why I changed, and they've either written it in a book or they're talking about it. And if I have to read every book that was ever written, I'll do it. And I started to study. And I never stopped studying. I have worked with some of the most brilliant people in the world. And I have found that you and I are programmed. And if we don't learn how to change the programming, nothing's going to happen. See, the programming controls your thinking. Most people wouldn't even think of writing the $5 million at that time because no one had ever done it. The fact that no one's ever done it is a good reason to do it. I want you to think about your income. Where's it at? Whatever it is. Do you sit down and think, how could I earn that much in a month? Let's take a person that's earning $50,000 in a year. How could they earn it in a month? When I first met my wife, she was selling insurance. That's how I met her, around 28 years ago. She had been working at it for 4.5 years. She was earning $24,500 a year. And I said, why would you work all year for that kind of money? You know, I knew exactly why she was working all year for that kind of money. The answer was obvious. She was programmed to work like that. Yet she had been doing it year after year. And I said, if you do what I tell you, I'll show you how to change your income. And I started to teach her something about the mind. I started to teach her how the mind functioned. And I started to show her how her paradigm was causing her thinking. And she changed it. And you know, over the coming year, her income went to $495,000. You say, well, I have difficulty believing that. You don't have to believe it. She was the one that had to believe it. And she did it. Now, this is so simple, and it's so misunderstood. See, paradigms control what we do. Yet they literally control what we do. I want you to think of a child in school. The child is struggling, trying to get a better grade. They go home and they've got a failing grade. What does the parent do? Parent puts them in a room, makes them ground them, makes them study. Wants them reading and studying their lessons. That's not their problem. These kids know how to ace the exam. Their behavior, what they're doing, is controlled by a paradigm. They're programmed to get the grades they're getting. I was programmed to get poor grades in school. I had a poor self-image. I had low self-esteem. You see, the paradigm controls what you do. Take a look here for a moment. I want you to imagine that you've got all these books stored in your conscious mind. You see, school gave us the information. The problem is school never taught us how to alter the paradigms. So we frequently don't do what we already know how to do and that we believe we can do. Just doesn't happen. Now think about it for a moment. I remember in the Navy, my commanding officer used to say, Proctor, why did you do that? And I said, I don't know, sir. He said, what do you mean you don't know? You know better. I know. Well, why did you do it? I don't know. I got in the Navy. Every job I had, they'd say, Proctor, why did you do that? See, I was doing things I didn't want to do. I was getting results I didn't want to get, and I was doing them anyway. And they'd say, why'd you do that? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? You know better. I know. Why are you doing that? I don't know. But I could take you right back to I was a little kid in school, and the teachers say, why are you doing that? And I'd say, I don't know. They say, what do you mean you don't? You know how to do better. I know. Why don't you do it? I don't know. And they didn't know either. See, they didn't understand that I was programmed to do what I was doing. Yet it was automatic. I wasn't even thinking. I was just moving into action. Do you know you can sit down with a person and they'll promise you, just as sure as it's going to get dark tonight, they're never going to do it again, whatever it is. You'll see a person say, I'm not eating anything white. I'm not eating anything sweet. I'm going to stay on this diet. 15 minutes later, they're into a big piece of chocolate cake. Why is that? It's because they're not in control. The paradigm's in control of them. Now, the paradigm doesn't have to control you, but in 99 cases out of 100 it does. It's not that we don't know what to do. We do know what to do. Our problem is we're not doing what we know how to do. That's the problem. We've got the information, and that's why we keep getting the same results. You see, the student that gets poor grades in school can get a better grade. If you've got a student that's getting poor grades, their problem isn't studying. That's not their problem. Sit down with them, help them understand who they are. Take this little model of the mind and the consciousness, subconscious, and start teaching it to them. Someone was asking me one time, how do you teach it to kids? And I said, the same as you teach it to adults, only it's easier to do. You see, children are making up their mind. Adults have got to change their mind. Adults don't want to do that. People don't want to take the time to really understand how the mind functions and then change it. The question is, can I change the paradigm? Absolutely. Anyone can change their paradigm. Now, what would you change? If you could change anything, what is it that you'd change? See, that's what Ray Stanford was the man that got me to look at that. I wanted money. That's all I wanted was money. I thought if I had enough money, all my problems would go away. Everybody under the sun was phoning me, where's the money? See, I was earning $4,000 a year, but I owed $6,000. It was an impossible situation. If I had taken every cent I earned for an entire year and just paid debts, I would have only broken even, and I'd had nothing to live on. So you see, I knew that I was never going to get out of debt. I mean, it was a bad situation. And Ray said, you just don't understand how to do it. But that doesn't mean you can't do it. He said there's phenomenal powers around you. I like the way Price Pritchett put it. He said the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The way to do whatever you want to do is already here. Well, I wanted money. And so I did the right thing. I decided I'm going to go after it. And I wrote on a card that I would have in my possession by New Year's Day of 1970. I gave myself a decade to do this. $25,000. You know, I went past that so fast because I started to think of earning money. Prior to that, I was thinking of debt. I started to take control of my thinking, and that's what I want to suggest you do. Now, we don't have the time to get into this any further today, but in this series, The Paradigm Shift, I'm going to tell you, you're going to learn a lot about you, and you're going to learn a lot about their paradigm. And understand that there's no shortcuts in life. I know you want to do it all today. It doesn't happen that way. There are no shortcuts, but you can take quantum leaps, I've mentioned a couple, through the transference of information and experience. And that's really what the paradigm shift is all about. I love teaching this, and I know that you're going to love the results you get from it. Your life can be totally different. It can be exactly the way you want it to be. This is Bob Proctor, and thank you.